Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for this wonderful turnout. Nothing so inspires a speaker. See a good turnout, and thank you so very much, Dean Starr, for that terrifically generous introduction. I have been called a legend, but generally he's a legend in his own mind. And so I appreciate your most generous comments. Vice Chancellor Borders, thank you for your hospitality here. Dr. E., my new friend. I think our little match here was made in heaven or something. And to Hank and Gloria, I'm honored to be speaking in the auditorium named after you and your family. And I guess I should say, fellow shareholders. As I'm sure we have, I don't need a show of hands, but my imagination tells me there may be quite a few of you here. It's delightful. This is my first visit to Pepperdine. I'm overwhelmed and delighted and excited to be in this magnificent part of the country. It's hard to believe it's in smoggy, old, crowded Los Angeles, but it's really just a delight in every way to be out here. I've spent a lot of time and thought on the challenge of measuring up to Dr. E's high appraisal of my career, his appraisal of the scores of speeches that I've delivered over the years. He actually read a lot of them, and especially my 2005 book, The Battle, The Soul of Capitalism. To find the battle on the same reading list as the Odyssey, let alone the same planet, adds even more to my burden of living up to particularly your expectations, but I hope the expectations of the audience this evening. I couldn't help thinking that the combination of the battle and the Odyssey might be something like a combination of the sacred and the profane, which is a great theme of Renaissance art. But 2 weeks ago, I didn't know quite what to say tonight, but 2 weeks ago, an article in the Arts and Leisure section of the Sunday Times gave me what I thought would be a unifying theme for tonight's lecture. This article was about someone whom I think most of you students may be familiar. His name is Brad McQuaid, and he is creator of EverQuest, a 3D fantasy game, video game, operating in the virtual world with 500,000 players, each paying $15 a month for the privilege. Not as popular as the champion, the World of Warcraft, 5 million players, but pretty amazing in its own right. Typical of my generation, alas, I am not among those players. But my constant attempt to understand what appeals to today's young citizens, and particularly you students in the audience, and my effort, however unlikely to bear fruit, to understand the new virtual world. I did read that Times article from start to finish, and it was about Mr. McQuaid's new virtual game, Vanguard, Saga of Heroes. Well, of course, the new game has nothing to do with, quote, my quote, Vanguard, that little investment firm that I created way back on September 24th, 1974, nor is the story of Vanguard a saga of heroes, save, I think, for the multitudes of heroes numbered among our 12,000-member crew who deserve so much credit for their loyalty and commitment. This philosophy is not new to me. Long ago, I've expressed these words of Helen Keller, which say it better than I could. I long to accomplish a great and noble task, but it is my chief duty to accomplish humble tasks as though they were great and noble. The world is moved along not only by the mighty shoves of its heroes, but also by the aggregate of the tiny pushes of each honest worker. It is these crew members, we don't like the word employees, who have dedicated themselves to serving, quote, in the most efficient, honest, and economical way possible. It's a phrase I'll use later on in the talk. Serving the now 20 million honest-to-God, down-to-earth human beings, each with their own hopes and fears and financial goals, another phrase I've used for as long as I can remember, who have entrusted Vanguard with the stewardship of their investment assets. And surely heroes ought to describe, must describe, those legions of investors who came aboard the good ship Vanguard in the early years of our existence, often without ever seeing a real person, sometimes without hearing a real voice, or looking up our credit rating on Dun & Bradstreet. They sent their checks in to Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, 19482, first in small amounts, and then in the millions, and then in the billions. And I believe these early believers in Vanguard's mission are also heroes for giving us their blind trust. In return, they're enjoying their fair share of returns generated in our financial markets. I'm confident they would agree that we've measured up to their trust in our vision and our values. The Odyssey, I hardly need to tell anybody here, is the story of the hero's journey, the building of character through overcoming the inevitable reverses of life, and the celebration, I'm now using Dr. E's words, of the classic American spirit. Indeed it is, that bestows on us the right and demands of us the duty to take ownership of our own lives. While a different saga, however, the Vanguard story, a very different saga, the Vanguard story is not without tangential parallels to Homer's timeless classic. At so many levels, then, Vanguard's saga of heroes, overstated as it may be, ties my story together with the study of entrepreneurship and technology in today's society. First, let me make it clear that I make no claim to being any kind of a hero, nor, in fact, do I have any particular claim on any qualities of leadership for myself. For as long as I can remember, all I've done is tried my best to take responsibility for the things I've touched along the road of life and to leave each thing better than I found it. Sure, I suppose that I have some of the qualities that are ascribed to leaders, the vision of the ideal, certainly, self-confidence and at least some self-awareness, a mind that, thanks to a wonderful education at Princeton, is probably above average, profound skepticism about the conventional wisdom of the day, and a determination to fight for the greater good, laboring in the interest of society as large as best we can in our imperfect way, and in particular, the interest of the investors of our land. While I'm about it, disclaiming, I might as well disclaim much ability as any kind of a manager or businessman, although I do hold to what I believe is the prime attribute of a successful manager. I've always trusted those around me with whom I've worked, and I've always done my best to honor their trust in me. In fact, I find, I'm sorry to say, more that I don't admire in the conduct of business today than what I do admire. I've loved, on that score, my active participation in the nonprofit world, notably in many years of service as chairman of the Board of Trustees of Blair Academy and as chairman of the National Constitution Center, which Ken Starr mentioned. Every bit as much I've loved them as I have in my now 55-year-old business career. Truth told, I often wish that some of the values of these public-spirited institutions, nonprofit institutions, could be reflected in the values of our business leaders. I've reveled in helping to build a better world there solely because, well, it seems like the right thing to do, not very complicated. Finally, one more disclaimer. While Vanguard is said to be the story of entrepreneurship, I'm not sure that I have any credentials as an entrepreneur. And what are you doing listening to me tonight? In fact, the creation of the firm resulted in the conversion of an existing firm, we didn't have to go out and raise capital, to a new corporate structure, one that was specifically designed to provide no equity participation, nor any entrepreneurial reward to its creator or to its staff. Rather, the whole idea was to put service in the interest of our investors rather than service in the interest of our management as the firm's highest value, and operating in our own very peculiar way as a nonprofit enterprise. But even as I disclaim these credentials of the hero, the credentials of the leader, the credentials of the business manager, and even the credentials of the entrepreneur, I shamelessly present my best credential. I am an idealist, a shameless idealist. Even more, I'm an idealist who revels in the values of the Enlightenment and holds high his admiration for the brilliance and character of our great thinkers, our great doers, the great adventurers of the 18th century, Men, as it happens, in particular our nation's founding fathers, who gave birth to our modern world and our nation. I confess to being immensely proud of the title of one of the chapters of a biography of me that was written back in 1996, I think. It was published in 1996. The title of the chapter was The 18th Century Man. I think that was a great compliment. A year ago, in a talk on entrepreneurship that celebrated the 300th anniversary of Benjamin Franklin, I reflected on this 18th century connection, if you will, with a wonderful quotation. Soon, think about this one, soon we will know everything that the 18th century didn't know and nothing it did, and it will be hard to live with us. Think about that. These words were the opening epigram of Building a Bridge to the 18th Century by the late Neil Postman, prolific author, social critic, and professor at New York University. His book presented an impassioned defense of the old-fashioned liberal humanitarianism that was the hallmark of the Age of Reason. His aim was to restore the balance between mind and machine, and his principal concern was our move away from an era in which the values and character of Western civilization were at the forefront of the minds of our great philosophers and leaders, and in which the prevailing view was that anything that's truly important must have a moral authority. Just what you were saying, Dean Starr. By way of contrast, in our present era of information technology, numbers and scientific techniques seem to be at the forefront of what we call our values. Metaphorically speaking, if you can't count it, it doesn't count. Surely this change has been reflected clearly in the change in capitalism from this system with values like trust and being trusted, trusting and being trusted at the fore, to a system heavily relying on numbers. We seem to blindly accept that financial matters are rational simply because numbers, however dubious their provenance may be, are definitive. While Postman made the bold assertion that truth is invulnerable to fashion and the passing of time, I'm not so sure. Indeed, I would argue that we've moved away from truth, however one might define it, to, with due respects to Stephen Colbert, truthiness. Truthiness. A presentation of ideas and numbers that convey neither more nor less than what we wish to believe in our own self-interest and persuade others to believe it too. We manage our truth by managing our numbers. That old bromide, you probably know it, many of you, of the management consultant. If you can measure it, you can manage it, has done us far more harm than good. As the 21st century begins then, our values have changed, and it's hard to resist conformity with a new society in which seemingly everything can be measured. I would argue everything except that which is important. And even Vanguard has emerged as a sort of a prototypical 21st century firm, a virtual organization, enormous in size now, had 28 people at the start, now 12,000, heavily reliant on process, real-time communications, and computer technology, and managed largely by the contemporary numeric standards of modern management. At our core, I hope and believe, through my idealistic eyes, we remain a prototypical 18th century firm, thriving on that early entrepreneurship, on our simple investment strategies, and on eternal verities such as service to others before service to self, doing our best to hold high the belief that ethical principles and moral values must be, finally, the basis for any enterprise worth its salt. Now, in today's grandiose era of capitalism, the word entrepreneur has come to be commonly associated with those who are motivated to create new enterprises, largely by the desire for personal wealth or even greed. At best, entrepreneurship entails, however, something much more important than mere money. And I'll now repeat the words that Dean Starr mentioned from the book, but from Joseph Schumpeter, written nearly a century ago in The Theory of Economic Development. They're worth hearing twice. He dismissed material and monetary gains, the prime mover of the entrepreneur, finding motivations like these. Dean Starr, I love these words as much as you do. The joy of creating, of getting things done, of simply exercising one's ingenuity and energy. And two, the will to conquer, the impulse to fight, that's my favorite, to succeed for the sake not of the fruits of success, but of success itself. That's the way it actually was in 18th century America, at least in the case of Benjamin Franklin. Fairly described as America's first entrepreneur, for Franklin, the getting of money was always a means to an end, not an end to itself. You know this. The enterprises created were designed for the public weal, not for his personal profit. When he joined with his colleagues in founding the Philadelphia Contribution Ship way back in 1752, an insurance company was a mutual company of all things, owned by its policyholders. This combination of ownership and service, creating a true mutuality of interest between the owners of a firm and its managers, was not then, nor is it now, the common mode of business organization. But the contribution ship has survived to this day, and very few companies last for 250 years. Franklin also founded a library, an academy, a college, a hospital, a learned society, all for the benefit of the community. Not bad, as inventions followed the same philosophy. He made no attempt to patent the lightning rod, and he declined the offer from the state of Pennsylvania for a patent on his Franklin stove, which revolutionized home heating in America, cutting greatly down on wood consumption, with great benefit to the public at large. Benjamin Franklin believed, I'm quoting here, that knowledge is not the property, the personal property of its discoverer, but the common property of all. As we enjoy great advantages from the inventions of others, he wrote, we should be glad of an opportunity to serve others by inventions of ours, and this we should do freely and generously. If it crosses your mind that Franklin's concepts of service to the greater good of the community and of creativity and innovation designed to improve the quality of life rather than for personal gain are rarer than they should be in today's wealth-driven, often greedy version of entrepreneurship, you have very good powers of observation. But however rare, examples exist. And truth told, the creation of Vanguard, like Franklin's contribution ship, creating a mutuality of interest between client and manager, reflects the very same values Franklin held high. Now, to the extent that the odyssey of Vanguard is, or at least begins, as my story, let me tell you a little bit about it. I do so that you will see that no heroism is involved, that no giant brain drew the design, that the implementation of our strategy required little in the way of inordinate business skills. Each one of you, particularly you students here tonight, have been given the opportunities and determination that I have been given, and you can do the same. You need the opportunities, I'll admit that, in whatever calling that you all want to follow. In our case, simplicity rather than complexity called the tune. The relentless rules of humble arithmetic, a phrase from Justice Brandeis, overwhelmed the need for imponderable statistical proofs, and leaps of faith rather than hard evidence rule the day. The idea that the shareholder, not the manager, should be king accounts for the lion's share of our growth. And it has been said of me, in fact, when I tell you how simple all this was, it has been said to me, not always in a kindly manner, that the only thing this poor guy has going for him is the uncanny ability to recognize the obvious. And so it is. That story begins, the Vanguard story, with the first of an almost infinite number of breaks that I've been given during my long life, came at Blair Academy, where thanks to a generous scholarship and a demanding job, first as a waiter and then as captain of the waiters, I received a terrific college preparatory education. I had no good education before that. That priceless advantage, in turn, presented me with another break, with the help of another full scholarship and another full-time job waiting on tables and commons. It's occurred to me in later years I must have been a very good waiter. I entered Princeton University in the late summer of 1947. It was easier to get admitted then, and if you don't believe that, just ask Dr. E., who post-dates me by 40 years as a member of the class of 1991. And despite my hard-won academic success at Blair, I found the early going at Princeton tough. The low point came in the autumn of 1948 when I struggled with my first exposure to the field of economics. There was not a happy introduction to my major field of study, and my low grades almost cost me my scholarship, and hence my entire Princeton career, because I had not a sou of outside financial support. But I pressed on as best I could, and my grades gradually improved and the crisis passed. While academic distinction continued to elude me, it gets better, by the way, don't worry. Fate smiled down at me once again a year later, determined to write my senior thesis on a subject that no previous thesis had ever tackled, that's the contrarian in me, Adam Smith and Karl Marx and John Maynard Keynes were not on my list. But what topic should I choose? In one of the most fantastic appearances of luck in my life, I was perusing Fortune magazine in the reading room of the then brand new Firestone Library in December 1949. And an interesting twist, I hadn't thought about this being star, that 50 years later, that's when they gave me this accolade of being some sort of a giant. So funny things can happen. But as I read Fortune, I paused on page 116 and began to read an article about business which I never imagined. We had no money, we had no stocks and bonds, we got a lot of dunning for debts the Bogle family owned, and I didn't know anything about investing. But when the title of the article was Big Money in Boston, and described the mutual fund industry as tiny but contentious. And this callow and insecure, but very determined young kid decided that mutual funds would be the topic of his thesis. I entitled it The Economic Role of the Investment Company. There just isn't any question that many of the values I identified in that thesis would decades later prove to be at the very core of Vanguard's growth. Quote, the principal function of mutual funds is the management of their investment portfolios. Everything else is incidental. Future industry growth can be maximized by a reduction of sales loads and management fees. And with a final rhetorical flourish, funds should operate in that phrase I mentioned to you earlier in my remarks tonight, in the most efficient, honest, and economical way possible. Sophomoric idealism? You bet. Designed for the enterprise that would emerge a quarter of a century later? Who knows? I'll leave it to you to decide. But whatever was truly in my mind all those years ago, the thesis clearly put forth the proposition that the mutual fund shareholder ought to be given a fair shake. I threw myself into the task of writing that thesis with abandon. I fell madly in love with my subject. I was convinced that that tiny $2 billion industry of yore would become huge and would remain contentious. I was right on both counts. It is now, this industry, a $10 trillion colossus, the nation's largest financial institution. And what's more, the countless hours that I'd spent researching and analyzing the industry in my little Carroll and Firestone Library was rewarded with a 1+, A+, and led to a magna cum laude diploma, a delightful, if totally unexpected, finale for my academic career at Princeton. Turnabout is fair play. Fate smiled on me yet again when Walter Morgan, the Princeton class of 1920, a nice little college tie there, old school tie, and the founder of Wellington Fund, read my thesis. More luck. In his own words, quote, largely as a result of his thesis, we have added Mr. Bogle to our Wellington organization. Another stroke of luck. Although I agonized over the risks of going into this young business, my research had persuaded me that the industry's future would be bright, and I cast my lot with this great Princetonian. Died at the age of 100. I knew him for 50 years, and I've never looked back. He had given me the opportunity of a lifetime. In 1965, Mr. Morgan had made it clear that I would be a successor. At that time, the company was lagging its peers, and he told me, quote, to do whatever it takes to solve our problems. Young and headstrong, with a self-confidence that belied my lack of wisdom and experience, I was then only 35 years old, I put together a merger with a high-flying group of 4 whiz kids who had achieved an extraordinary investment performance over the preceding 6 years. Such an approach, believing that past performance has the power to predict future performance, is of course antithetical to everything I believe today. It was a great but very expensive lesson. Together, we 5 whiz kids whizzed high for a few years, and then, of course, we whizzed low. The speculative fever in the stock market in the go-go era of the mid-1960s went. Just like the new economy bubble of the late 1990s, it burst and was followed by a 50% market decline. The once happy band of partners had a falling out, and in January 1974, I was proposed as head of what I had considered my company, and I was heartbroken. But necessity being the mother of invention, I decided to pursue an unprecedented course of action, definitely in my own self-interest. I've got a nice self-preservation instinct. The management company directors, management companies run all the funds, who fired me, composed only minority of the board of directors of Wellington Fund itself. So I went to the fund board with a novel proposal. Why don't we have the fund and its associated mutual funds, there were then 10, today there are more than 100 in the group, declare their independence from the manager and retain me as their full-time chairman and CEO. After a contentious debate that lasted 7 months, we won the battle to administer the funds on a truly mutual basis under which they would be operated at cost by their own wholly owned subsidiary. With only weeks to go before incorporation, we still had no name for the new firm. Fate, of course, you're probably getting used to this now, smiled again. By happenstance, as the battle for the fund board approval raged on, I stumbled across a book describing the historic Battle of the Nile, where Lord Nelson sank the entire French fleet and ended Napoleon's dream of world conquest. There was Nelson's triumphant dispatch from his flagship, HMS Vanguard. The words in that dispatch, the proud naval tradition, and the great victory, combined with the leading-edge implication of the name Vanguard, were more than I could resist. So on September 24th, 1974, the Vanguard Group was born. Ironically, without the 1951 hiring, which providentially brought me into this business, and the 1974 firing, which abruptly took me out of it, there would be no Vanguard today. I'm fond of saying that I left my old job at Wellington the same way I began my new job at Vanguard. Fired with enthusiasm. You have to think about that one for a minute. Time does not permit me, this paragraph is in here for Elliot, time does not permit me to describe in detail the Vanguard Odyssey that was to follow our fortuitous launch in 1974. But its parallels to Homer's Odyssey, while hardly exact, are nonetheless there. We've wasted time with our own lotus eaters, Elliot. We've been enticed by our own wily sirens. We've sailed uneasily between Scylla and Charybdis. We've brazenly defied more than one Cyclops. We've been threatened by the wrath of our own Poseidon. And we've been temporarily entranced by some very bewitching Calypsos. But we've survived our 32-year voyage and returned home proud and prosperous. For a brief moment of reflection. And of course we know that life is a journey and not a destination, and that a new odyssey always lies ahead. As you might imagine, it's difficult for me to believe that such a new voyage could have the excitement, it's impossible for me to believe it really, and challenge of Vanguard's first one. After all, putting a new name on the map, creating a new structure, unique, establishing a new set of ethical values, can't occur over and over again. Whether it was true entrepreneurship or not, and I leave that one to you, we did create a new form of governance in the fund industry, a mutual structure in which the interests of managers take, the interests of fund investors take precedence over the interests of managers and distributors. We then formed the world's first index fund, a passive portfolio designed simply to provide the returns provided by the stock market itself, a challenge that precious few portfolio managers have measured up to over time. We developed a new paradigm for bond fund management using an innovative three-tier structure of long-term, short-term, and intermediate-term portfolios, not very imaginative, but it became the industry standard overnight. And we abandoned, also overnight, a proven broker-dealer, commission-oriented, supply push distribution system in favor of a new and totally untried, no sales load, demand pull system for self-motivated investors. None of these changes that we all take for granted today came easily. To get them done required a devil-may-care attitude, a blasé disregard for risk, a profound conviction without any hard evidence that they would work, and the sheer energy required to get it all done. And what's more, they were contentious. Contentious, that word you heard before from tiny but contentious industry. Despite what we regarded as our noble intentions in putting this new structure together, the completion was initially opposed by our industry's regulator, the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. They turned down our ability to run Vanguard. And they dawdled over our appeal to do so for 4 long years. And when it finally gave us its unanimous approval in 1981, it came with a nice bonus and what I would call a snappy salute. Quote, from the SEC unanimously, the Vanguard plan actually furthers the 1940 Act's an Investment Company Act of 1940's objectives and promotes a healthy and viable mutual fund complex in which each fund can better prosper. That after 4 years of rejection. And prosper we did. By the time the SEC finally gave us the green light in 1981, 7 long years after we began, the stock market had begun to recover and our assets doubled from $1.4 billion to $3 billion. They would double again with remarkable regularity approximately every 3 years. In 1983, $6 billion, 1985, $12 billion, 1986, $24 billion, 1989, $50 billion, 1992, $100 billion, 1995, $200 billion, and again to $400 billion in 1998. Remarkable. Well, it took longer, in fact 7 more years, for assets to double yet again. We crossed the $800 billion mark in 2004, and today we oversee $1.1 trillion of other people's money. That mighty engine that has driven that amazing growth was powered largely by our simple group of index funds, those structured bond funds I mentioned, and our money market funds, each providing a near causal relationship, obvious relationship, between low cost and high returns. The assets of these funds themselves, the bond, the money market, and the index, comprise nearly $800 billion, actually more than $800 billion, or 3/4 of our asset base. What's more, we apply those same index principles to substantially all of the remainder of assets, largely actively managed equity funds. That is to say, emphasis on rock-bottom expenses, minimal portfolio turnover, no sales loads, with diversified investment quality portfolios and clearly defined objectives and strategies. That's across the board at Vanguard, pretty much across the board. Most important in the marketplace of intelligent long-term investors, individual, institutional alike, our strategies have worked very effectively for those whom we serve. The returns earned by our funds are consistently ranked near the top of our industry, but no matter who's doing the ranking, most recently by Global Investor #1. It's fair to say, I think, that Vanguard has represented an artistic success for our fund shareholders and a commercial success for our firm, and we have never been copied despite that. So the odyssey has not only been long and arduous, it has been exhilarating and rewarding. Now, if I may, when I think of the good fortune that has brought me to where I am this evening, I give the highest credit to a set of strong family values, if I may say so, a faith in God, a fine preparation for college at Blair Academy, and the powerful reinforcement and new awakening I received through a liberal education at Princeton University. A few years ago, former President Harold Shapiro of Princeton defined these 2 aims of a liberal education. Quote, one is the importance of achieving educational objectives, a better understanding of our cultural inheritance in ourselves, a familiarity with the foundations of mathematics and science, and a clarification of what we mean by virtue. The other is the importance of molding a certain type of citizen, one who is engaged in the search for truth and new understanding, the freeing of the individual from previous ideas, the pursuit of alternative ideas, the development of integrity and the power of reason of individual goals, and the preparation for an independent and responsible life of choice. President Shapiro emphasized the responsibility of the university, and I know you know this probably as well as anybody in America right here, of offering a liberal education to provide its students with a moral education, helping them develop values that will enrich their lives as individuals and as members of society. During my 4 years there, I did my terribly imperfect best to acquire these values and to manifest themselves in my activities in the many years that have followed. As I look back on hindsight on my life, with glasses that have an inevitably rosy hue, I can only say that the liberal and moral education that was placed before me at Princeton may well have ignited some deep, and I guess you'd say unimagined, spark that began to influence my life and my career in the mutual fund field. This spark, nurtured by time and experience, then erupted into some sort of a flame, one that has permeated my ideas about the proper nature of the mutual fund. That flame, although it hasn't spread very far now, will spread one day to this industry and I guarantee you it will become a blaze, and it will not be easy to extinguish. It is my prayer that my mission, my crusade, if you will, that's too lofty a characterization, will help this industry rethink its values and accordingly be of greater service to millions of American investors, tens of millions. Serving these new owners of American business who are contributing to the highest values of our system of capital formation, even as they strive to take personal responsibility for the security of their own financial futures, has been a marvelously worthwhile life's work, and I have been infinitely blessed. It's wonderfully ironic that the very same 1949 issue of Fortune that inspired my thesis included a feature essay entitled, of all things, The Moral History of U.S. Business. Sad to relate, I have no recollection of reading it in 1949. I got to be truthful, you know. But I did read it a few years ago. Someone got me a mint condition of that Fortune magazine, one of our crew members. And I did read it a few years ago, a half century later. As I reflected on Vanguard's guiding principles of prudent investing and personal service, both seem to me to be related to the kind of moral responsibility of business that was expressed in that ancient Fortune essay. The essay began by noting that the profit motive is hardly the only motive that lie behind the labors of the American businessman. Other motives include, I'm quoting from the article here, the love of power or prestige, altruism, pugnacity, patriotism, and the hope of being remembered through a product or institution. Yes, all of the above, and I freely confess to all of those motives. Life is too short to be a hypocrite. And I also agree with the Fortune in that essay on the appropriateness of the traditional tendency of American society to ask, what are the moral credentials for the social power the businessman wields? It has some old-time quotes in that article. It quotes the words of Quaker businessman John Woolman of New Jersey, who in 1770 wrote, "It is good to advise people to take such things as were most useful and not costly." It cites Benjamin Franklin's favorite words, industry and frugality, as the best means of producing wealth and receiving virtue. And I really love this one. Moving to 1844, the essay cites William Parsons, a merchant with these wonderful words, who describes the good, he was describes the merchant of probity, and he describes the good merchant with the following wonderful words, quote, "An enterprising man willing to run some risks, yet not willing to risk in hazardous enterprises the property of others entrusted to his keeping. Careful to indulge no extravagance, and to be simple and unostentatious in its habits. Not merely, think of these words, not merely a merchant, but a man with a mind to improve, a heart to cultivate, and a character to form." These demands, uttered more than 160 years ago, were not only wonderful words, but when I read them, I think and thought they were directed right at me. As for the mind, even at my age, I still strive every day, I really do, to improve my own mind, reading, reflecting, and challenging even my own deep-seated beliefs. As for the heart, no one could possibly revel in the opportunity to create it more than I, because just 6 days ago, after all, I marked the 11th anniversary of the amazing grace represented by the incredibly successful heart transplant that I received in 1996. And as for character, whatever moral standard I may have developed, I've tried to invest my own soul and spirit in the character of that little firm I founded all those years ago. On a far grander scale than just one human life, these standards of mind, of heart, and of character resonate as ever idealistically in how we seek to manage the billions of dollars entrusted to Vanguard stewardship, and in how I pray that my company will ever see itself putting the will and the work of a business enterprise in the service of others. Perhaps it's obvious these values eventually inspired me to expand my horizons beyond the narrow confines of the mutual fund industry in which I've spent my entire career. The result, of course, is the battle for the soul of capitalism, published by Yale, yes, Yale University Press in 2005, our big rivals. In essence, battle is my cri de coeur, no pun intended, about the state of American capitalism and the state of American society today. It is one idealistic book. Just consider its first words with the dedication to my 12 grandchildren and the other fine young citizens of their generation. With 6 of these grandchildren in college, all you students here, I think mostly back there, are part of that generation and hence part of this dedication. My generation, I'm reading the dedication in its entirety, has left America with much to be set right. You have the opportunity of a lifetime to fix what has been broken. Hold high your idealism and your values. Remember that even one person can make a difference, and do your part to begin the world anew. A single turn of the page, 5 epigraphs, count them 5, the first of which comes from St. Paul. If the sound of the trumpet shall be uncertain, who shall prepare himself for the battle? And in my acknowledgments, I get right to the point in the very first paragraph. Capitalism has been moving in the wrong direction. The introduction that follows doesn't let up. I start off with a remarkably light revision of the classic first paragraph of Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, adapted to the present era. You'd be amazed how much change that took. Here's Gibbon's first sentence and then mine. Gibbon, in the 2nd century of the Christian era, the empire of Rome comprehended the fairest part of the earth, first sentence in Gibbon's book, and the most civilized portion of mankind. Rewritten in battle, as the 20th century of the Christian era ended, the United States of America comprehended the most powerful position on earth and the wealthiest of mankind. So when I add Gibbon's conclusion, yet the Roman Empire would decline and fall, a revolution which will be ever still felt by the nations of the earth, I'm confident the thoughtful readers do not miss the point. That didn't bother me. I got home anyway. Gibbon's history reminds us that no nation can take its greatness for granted. There are no exceptions. As one of 2 reviews, both very generous, of the battle that appeared in the New York Times noted, subtle Mr. Bogle is not. He's sensing that. I'm not writing off America. I would never do that. But my certain trumpet is a warning that we better put our house in order. The example of the fall of the Roman Empire, quoting from the book, my book, ought to be a strong wake-up call to all of those who share my respect and admiration for the vital role that capitalism has played in America's cause. Thanks to our marvelous system, based on private ownership of productive facilities, on prices set in markets, on personal freedom, we are the most prosperous in history, the most powerful nation on the face of the globe, and most important of all, the highest exemplar of values that later are shared by the human beings of nations, the inalienable right to, yes, you, life, liberty, and the pursuit of peace. But something wrong. By the years of the 20th century, our business values have eroded to a remarkable extent. The greed, even materialism and waste that seem almost in today's version of capitalism, the huge disparity in our nation between the have and not, power, lack of education, our mission to the world's natural resources, the corruption of our political system, all are manifestations of going awry. Here's where the soul of capitalism comes in. The human soul, as Aquinas defined it, is the vital power animating and shaping visual, drawing the energy of life, unity, in another world animated system, drawing all of its energies. In this sense, it is no overstatement to describe turn these capitalism the book title Capitalism let up. It doesn't even the problem brought us suicidal by the evil issue of city A business line society not for subsidies issue over the and even that may be a hard as it takes capital serving the owner system became profit accountants other corporate why is because it's sort of ownership owner so red student ownership individual shareholders individual director agent here behavior agent too often the A E